All right, so let's start with the big story that we're tracking on WION at this hour, when a huge victory for President Joe Biden. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, with no Republicans voting in its favor. With the bill clearing its final hurdle in the Congress, the relief package now heads to U.S. President Joe Biden's desk to be signed into a law. Now, Biden has reacted to the bill's passage, calling it as a historic victory for the American people.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized. This bill is...
I want to thank Speaker Pelosi and the House of Representatives today for passing the bill, and I will be signing into law shortly. This bill represents a historic victory for the American people.
Joe Biden made this happen, and it is a very important day for the children of America, for the families of America, for the small businesses. It is a very important day in terms of what we are now going to be able to do to make sure that everyone has access to the help they need.
Now, the $1.9 trillion plan is one of the largest U.S. rescue packages ever. The final bill includes one-off direct payments of $1,400 for a large majority of Americans. It also extends a weekly unemployment benefit payment of nearly about $300 until the month of September. The bill also allocates funds to state governments, schools, expanding on COVID-19 testing and research, and also vaccine distribution. A proposal to raise the national minimum wage from $50 to $15 per hour became a bit of a sticking point in the Senate and has not made it into the final version of the bill. The bill only narrowly passed through the House of Representatives by a majority of 220 against 211. And it has got zero support from the Republicans who accused Joe Biden of abandoning his Inauguration Day pledge of unifying a divided nation.
To stop their March Madness and show some compassion.
This is a classic example of big government Democratic overreach in the name of COVID relief, and we all know that what we should have been doing and would have been done had this been a bipartisan discussion instead of a jam the other side approach is $500 or $600 billion directly targeted at the problem. But of course, the $1.9 trillion problem, as we said repeatedly, the $1.9 trillion package, as we said repeatedly, only had about 1% or less for vaccines, 9% or less for health care. So I think this is actually one of the worst pieces of legislation I've seen pass here in the time I've been in the Senate.
Now, the overall package has been broadly popular amongst the Americans and the Democrats, who control both chambers of the Congress by a very narrow margin and have managed to largely retain most of what was initially proposed in the draft. Now, the pandemic has triggered America's worst public health crisis in over a century. It has left more than 500,000 Americans dead, and over 29 million are said to have been infected. Now, to give us more updates in terms of what's actually unfolding with the passage of this COVID-19 relief bill, we are joined in by our correspondent Kate Fisher, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Kate, for being a part of this broadcast on WION. Let me begin by asking you this. This is the first crucial bit of legislation that's been passed by Joe Biden's administration. So what happens from here on?
Yeah, this is a hugely important moment in Joe Biden's presidency. He promised to get this done in the first 100 days of his presidency, and on day 50, he has done that. It is being hailed as historic by him. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, saying that this is the most consequential legislation that any of us will ever be a party to. The Democrats really seeing this just not just as relief for the American people who have suffered through this pandemic, but also almost a rewriting of the federal safety net of the kind of social security that's offered here in the US. It is really giving a huge boost in support to low-income families, many of whom have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic in terms of health and their financial situation as well. So Joe Biden sees this as a big win for him, and it certainly appears to be at the moment that a cornerstone of his presidency already achieved. But of course, the big test now is how the Biden administration implements this. And the American people and the Republicans in particular will be looking to see how efficiently and how effectively this all happens, and if there are any issues with, for example, distributing the stimulus checks or ensuring that working families get these child tax credits.
Absolutely. And one thing that actually stands out with the passage of the bill in the House of Congress is that not a single Republican legislator voted in favor of this bill. Why were the Republicans opposed to it? What changes did they want?
Absolutely, and this is one of the big problems for the Democrats, is that Joe Biden came into the presidency saying that he wanted to govern in a bipartisan manner. He wanted to get Republicans on board, particularly for this really important legislation that he said should appeal to anybody regardless of their political party, because it was about helping the American people financially and to help them through the pandemic. But as you say, he did not achieve getting any single Republican member of Congress on his side. And that's a problem, because this is only the first bill that he has wanted to put through in the 4 years of his presidency. There's going to be a lot more. And if he's not able to get Republicans on board for the first one, and one that has broad appeal, I mean, this has the majority of the public are in favor of this legislation, yet still Republican lawmakers wouldn't get on board. Their reasoning was that they said it was simply too big. $1.9 trillion was just too much money for them to be spending. They are fiscally conservative and they did not want that kind of debt. Joe Biden's argument is they needed to invest this much money to kickstart the economy, get people back on their feet, and try to save those small businesses that are struggling so much.
Absolutely indeed. Kay, do stay on with us, because I want you to weigh in on another interesting story that we are tracking on WION. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.